Yeah. I think the cool thing about this class that takes place is because it's in the fall, you're gonna get in, this task force is out of your home, and here we are in talk about transportation. I've got a couple of comments from some students, some folks saying this is more than what they bargained for, perhaps, or this is perhaps really getting back to school with homework assignments and lecturing and listening to folks. How is everybody? Thumbs up, great. How are you doing in terms of your projects, your research? You gotta let it be very flexible until the day that you actually have to present. Thank you. Thank you for that. Yeah, I know everybody has lives, everybody's got a lot of stuff going on, so I don't want to force you, but by the time you have to be up and present, that's when you're like, whoa, I gotta pay attention to what am I working on again? So we're here again. I see some projects trickling in, so there are some more. I think a lot of you are still doing your research. Folks are also turning in their maps and turning in, doing their research and working towards the project. So I just want to put it out there that it is something in the horizon that we should focus on for the completion of the course. And I got an interesting email from the office of our congressman earlier in an hour, and it was a request from a student in this class to ask him to sign the certificate. I think that was inspiration from last week when Alan Lato presented his certificate back in 1996. So I'm going to work with his office to see if we can get these signatures for you. So since I give you an impetus to like really, even more so work on development of your project. I also invited him to join in on a field trip at Streetcar. So not sure he's going to be around, but he shows up in these classes once in a while.
They have a speaker at the house with a speaker book.
I know. Well, there's so much stuff going on in November 11th too, so I'm not sure if he's going to be at DC or here, but I mean, I sent an invitation for him to attend a field trip or maybe even hop in and one of the classes since he just showed up. He's done that before. So that's what I have in terms of announcements. Our field trip poll has gone out. Some of you have returned and signed up. The only thing we really need is for you to wear closed-toe shoes, and we can provide vests. No hard hats are necessary. Yeah, we're not in the instruction zone. So that's essentially what we have in terms of the announcements. Does anybody have any questions from last week, last 5 or 6 days? Make it short.
Y'all gonna have office hours for us to sell our products?
So what we've been doing now, not specific office hours, but you can reach out to us, we can have a conversation with you via a Zoom call or a Teams call for the time that works. So you want to talk about your projects? Yes. Okay. So let's talk about some time so we can discuss. So yeah, let me know if there's anything else that you want us to follow on. Yes.
This is a question, but in the Slack channel, I posted this survey. If all of you guys are able to fill it out, that would be awesome. Yeah.
Awesome. Okay, so tonight we're going to talk about some engineering principles, top engineering principles, and also tie in with equity. And one of the things that has been really, and the midline of my work has been accessibility for everybody. So we also have invited somebody at PBOT whose specialty is in ADA. So first off, I want to share with you, we've got Marisa DeMull. Marisa DeMull. Yeah. And also Lisa Strader with PBOT. So we're going to go through and talk through some of the engineering principles, also ADA, but I wanna, also start off this project, this class talked about one specific project, which is the Division Street, Division Transit project and also Division Street out in East Portland. So we asked you to bring your laptops or iPads or some sort of devices in which we can zoom in to these intersections and work through the exercises. It's gonna be different than the last few classes, because we'll be able to do a break and then work on these exercises and ask you some questions about some of the improvements and the communications along division. So first off, I want to share some of the community engagement component, which is what I had led. So let's bring up the first presentation. So I think many of you are familiar with the work that I've done. Like I said, I have an engineering background. My work has been in transportation planning, but over the last 7 to 8 years, I've been pegged as somebody who can really bridge that gap and do that translation between the hard technical piece and also the community engagement. So when I launched my firm 8 to 9 years ago, I was very intentional in reaching out to communities, especially the communities that have stemmed from and communities in which there are some vulnerable folks out there, some BIPOC folks, and those in East Portland. So over the last many years, I think started in 2015, 2014, PBOT had really been intentional in looking at doing more work out in East Portland. So in the work and planning for what now we call Division Transit Project or Division Street, was a huge planning process from what they call the Powell Division Corridor, and there's huge stakeholder engagement from many jurisdictions, from Portland all the way out to Gresham, covering much of Multnomah County, to look at the routes that would make sense for most, and how it would play out. So Metro was involved, TriMet was involved, all the key players in which you've heard from was involved in this development. So what had come out of it is what you're seeing now, which we're going to dive further in, which is Division Street, part of this Division Transit Project, which is TriMet's component, and then the Division Street Outer Division Multimodal Project. So it's a big name for it, but I wanted to share some of the work that I've done with this was leading a town hall meeting that took place on 82nd and Division, and so you'll see some of the work. This lives on my website, but also it's a really interesting class that I taught at U of O in the architecture school, which was the impetus for this town hall meeting that took place in July 11th, I don't remember. Anyway, no, it was 14. I think it was 18. So this is kind of a big town hall meeting. You go to the next slide. I want to share some of the engagement that we've done with most of the communities out there. We were intentional in reaching out to the J District because that was where 82nd Division is. And then we did an outreach all the way out through the corridor, all the way to the end of the line, which is towards Division Midway. But one of the big things that we also did was making sure folks who live in the corridor were a part of the project. So I think Alan had mentioned this in his presentation last week, or some of it is that I'm also on the side of the construction team. So I was doing quite a bit of outreach with our contractor called Raymore Construction. And they were very intentional to uphold a particular threshold and percentage for the work that's what's taking place out in Division. And making sure that folks who live and work and also represent our communities are part and was a part of that project and also can build business. So we did quite a bit of work with our small businesses and engagement for Division project.
So if you go to the next slide, we did some canvassing on 82nd Avenue. This is a while back. And we had a family that welcomed us in as we did the canvassing for 82nd Avenue. So this is just an example of some folks that we reached out to. And then next, Division Street, we're gonna hear more about it, but this is one of the pedestrian bridges out in Division. If you ever head out that way, this design was very popular, I think, back in the 60s. Very few people use it. The only time they really use it is when officials come out and say, this is what the traffic looks like. But it's kind of an interesting design. You can see how much transportation has changed over the years, what's been built, what is still usable now, and what is essentially art. If you go to the next one, I want to do a quick scan of a video. Can you bring this up? This was a field trip that we did last year out. We did a walk for 82nd Avenue. And if you can bring up the video. Yeah, and then we'll just show you. Show you at this point what the vision looks like. That was very cool day. It's a very cool day. So this was one of our students. This was our class last year, and this do this a part of our. I asked for his permission, of course. But this lives on Edgar's website, and I just thought it was really pleasant there. I didn't even know it was done. Furthermore, we get into we'll share what modifications have been done, but I just wanted to share this. Like right now. We'll do more in other graphs. Okay, so we're good. Thank you. Yeah, so we're not doing that this year, but you got a glimpse of what we did last year on our walk. So with that, I'm gonna bring up my colleague, Marisa, and she's gonna talk about some engineering principles.
Hi. There we go. Yes. Thank you. Indeed, I'm Marisa DeMull. I shoot her programs, and I'm a traffic design engineer for the city of Portland. I really admire people who take night classes. I admire it more when I get here because I realize I no longer possess the energy to be out past. Work night.
Marisa,
Yes.
if you present from here, we have a microphone here, so it'll be easier for
Do
people.
you mind if I stand very
Yeah,
close to you?
yeah, please.
Okay, great. I'll stand very close to you. So a little bit about me. I've been a traffic engineer for 8 years, for 9 years, technically in the field. One of those years I was the equity manager, equity and inclusion manager for PBOT, which is where I work closely with Lisa Strader. And I'm very happy that we have her and her ADA expertise. People don't often associate ADA and equity together, but in fact, we are one and the same. So today I'm really gonna just talk about traffic design, which I know doesn't sound like the most exciting. I'll do my best. But I think when we think about transportation, we talk a lot about planning and we talk about outreach, but traffic design engineering is where metaphorically and really the rubber hits the road, right? Whatever we talk about and hypothesize, we have to boil that down to numbers and quantities and constructability, right? And then we have to put that in the right way. So do you want me to do, oh, you're gonna do it, okay, great. All right, so traffic engineering. I chose this really nice part of Southwest, and folks know it, is you get to see the highway, you get to see that's the streetcar that comes through here. We have some beautiful bike lanes that it's new, so it looks really shiny. And this is sort of, it's a nice kind of like encapsulation of really the broad variety of things that you work on when you're a traffic engineer at the city of Portland. So we focus on the safe and efficient movement of people and goods. That's kind of your classic definition of what a traffic engineer does. Traffic design is a subset of traffic engineering in that we literally design the roads. Like we design the signals, and we're going to go through those assets here. That's actually what we're going to be talking about. Let's see. The cool part about traffic and design engineering, I think, is that it is really part psychology and part design engineering. So in order to be a really good traffic design engineer, especially at a place like PBOT, you really have to understand what motivates people, how we can sort of like gently manipulate them into doing the thing that we want them to do. And then like, you also really have to have like a deep bench of knowledge of all of the levers and tools and guidance and manuals that are available to help you pull those levers. So before we start into the presentation, I'm gonna just pass these around. Okay, be careful if you are wearing something white. I learned today, PBOT's printers are terrible.
Good to know.
And they bleed. So when you're touching this and then the handouts I get out later, just, you're gonna get ink on your fingers and I apologize. So these are. This is a graphic of our assets, PBOT's assets. These are all the things we own and manage. Specifically that we manage, we don't own everything on here. We have some really unique things like a heliport. And then we have sort of the mundane pavement that you sort of think of when you think of what a transportation agency would own. We also have 188 stairways. If you live in Southwest, you're probably familiar with our stairways, or some of them at least. And the things that we're going to be talking about today are the crosswalks, our lane lines, our traffic lights, and signs that I don't see on here, but it's a huge number.
Is that graphic available online somewhere?
Oh yeah, I'm getting this one too. And you're welcome to keep those copies. I didn't bring a lot because I was like, who will want this? So my bad. All right, next slide. Let's start talking about our assets. One of the things I guess we don't think about a lot, because in the way in which civil engineering is like 99% invisible to most people by design, right? Is something that you should experience every day but not think about. Pavement markings are kind of the bread and butter of what I do. In the most basic sense, it is the way in which we split our modes. So we delineate, this is where the right turn is, this is where the bike goes, this is where vehicles move through, right? Or take a left. This is where pedestrians go, maybe if we put pedestrian walkway in the streets. In a more kind of romanticized way, this is our basic tool we have for helping people to make the right decision at any given intersection or any given segment of road. And we do that through a variety of ways, like our crosswalks, our green paint, right? But also some of the kind of real basic things are the way that we dash our streets will indicate to you whether or not you can merge, whether or not you can pass, if there's a bike lane present, right? So these are all the subtle but kind of basic tools of what traffic design looks like at the city of Portland. The second kind of highest use thing that we do everywhere is permanent traffic control signs, not to be confused with temporary traffic control signs, and those are the things we put up during construction. They're often orange and they say, you know, bikes in roadway or construction ahead or whatever they might say for that particular use. We have some really common permanent traffic control signs like your stop signs and your yield signs, and we have some more uncommon traffic signs like no turn on red from this lane, right? Which we may only have one really specific circumstance where that gets used. But because of that very specific circumstance, the manual on uniform traffic control devices, which is the sort of Bible of signals and street lighting and pavement markings and traffic control signs, has put it in there under R10-11D. So any state you go in, that's what it's gonna be. This is our federal guidance. And it's, you know, likely for those places where you have like a dual right turn. And maybe in the middle lane, we don't want you to take a right from there onward, right? So some very specific circumstance came up. It was common enough across states that they decided to make a federal rule. Here in PBOT, we have a ton of signs that are just ours, which you will know if you operate a vehicle of any type in the city of Portland and have operated it anywhere else. We have a really specific way that we like to do our transportation and our transportation design. And some signs that have ended up in MUTCD have come sort of from things PBOT has piloted, and some of our signs are not in the MUTCD, and that is great too. And that's, again, the manual on uniform traffic control devices, so we say MUTCD. All right.
It's a big green net.
It is, I haven't seen a hard copy of that in years. Yeah.
Does that only cover signals? So is it like another manual for like road widths and?
It covers, yes, and yes to both of those things. So it covers all the things that I mentioned. I call what I do like the accessories and makeup of the road, which is very feminine metaphor now that I'm saying it like here. But the paint, right, sort of like the makeup, and then the accessories like the signs and the signals, like, so it covers all of that, the MUTCD. So traffic control devices are how we sort of categorize those things. But we also have AASHTO, which is the American Association of State Highway Transportation Officials, I believe. That might not be 100%, but I'm pretty sure I know that. AASHTO has its own set of guidelines, and then we have a highway capacity manual that will also, so there's like, the manuals are obscene, the number of manuals and guidance. You kind of have to know, I would say most of the education in becoming a traffic engineer is just understanding what manual you need when. And that's, that can be really complicated, unfortunately. But wouldn't be a bureaucratic organization. Yeah. Any other questions before we move to traffic signals? Traffic signals, this is one of my favorite images because this is one of the few places in Portland where we have 4 traffic signals, and none of them are sort of the ball, we call it ball traffic signal, which is like around them. And so do people count the 4? We see, I know there's the 3 on the top, the 4 being our pedestrian signal, which is we count as a traffic signal. And is a part of our ADA efforts, and so we'll definitely, I'll be able to tell you more about that. The 2 right arrows, so that's kind of an uncommon, I would say, signal here in Portland as well. We often don't signalize that, we just put no right turn on the red sign, right? And then this one, which we use a lot on vision, I think sort of this.
That's 50 seconds, isn't it?
This is, yeah, Powell, and is it 50 seconds or 20?
I hope it's 50 seconds.
Let's say 50 seconds, I believe it.
No, it's division.
Yeah, I want to say it's 28, but I did work on this. This is an ODOT project, and we have to design to our standards, which is a great revision. So this one, no left turn, right? So we have all of these really very unique circumstances here. We have a bunch of bike signals out on the vision, which is great. The bike signal gets a twofer. You get a little bike in the signal, and then you get a sign just to tell you what the bike in the signal is doing, which I love. Redundancy is key. So, so you have the sign and the signal, and then of course we would have briefings. You get that's 2, 3, 4. So now you definitely know a bike thing is happening here. You should have gotten it 3 times the message that's happening here. We have 4 signals, and each of these signals would have been installed using a warrant. Why did they call them a warrant? I couldn't say.
What?
A warrant, like a warrant. Like, I don't know how else to refer to it. And it is
Is that one slip board or one like the rest?
like that type of warrant. Yeah, that's like one. I was like, I could spell it, I guess. The warrants are from METCD, which we were talking about a little bit ago. And there's 8 types of warrants. They are basically a minimum threshold for what you have to meet in order to install a traffic signal. They can be things like have 5 serious crashes, and by serious, it means the level of injury that's happened in that crash happened in the last 3 years. Have you got 85% of the vehicles that travel through here, do they go this speed? Are they, this many vehicles in the day happening at this? So like for 8 hours of the day, are 75% of your vehicles going through here, right? So things that would get to the capacity for that roadway to deal with counter traffic. If I was trying to take a left at any point of the day, would I be able to do it, right? That's kind of the question that we're answering with the signal. We have interim solutions like a 4-way stop, which you'll see, right? But I know we've all been at a 4-way stop and we're like, this is not the effective treatment for this intersection, right? And in that case, that might be an interim solution before they put in a signal, because this is a huge investment for us. It is hundreds of thousands of dollars for us to put in a signal. Stop sign, that's like a couple of minutes.
I recall hearing it's about $800,000 for a traffic signal. Is that number like year accurate?
That would be like for a whole intersection upgrade. I'm working on a project right now at Beaverton Highway, Beaverton Hillsdale Highway, and Shattuck, if people are familiar with that intersection. It's a rough one. Yeah, great. I brought this one up. And so our budget is $1 million for signals at every corner, right? So we have like 4 lanes of signals, pedestrian signals included, and some minor pedestrian upgrades like curb ramps as well. So that, I would say $1 million for one intersection for like ramps and signals, that's probably about right. Very expensive.
Well.
Yes.
Now, when you develop the signals report. Well, those signals kind of have to be what's used out through our reporting. Because we have the word driver's manual to tell people what signals is.
Absolutely.
So they have to be universal.
That's right, but not for Washington, right? So they do theirs separately, yeah. So the way our kind of jurisdictional guidance works is we have the federal highway, or USDOT, US Department of Transportation, or the Federal Highway Administration, and then your state government is the second governing body. And so anything they decide supersedes anything PBOT would want to do. So let's say we had a super specific sign. If Federal Highway decided they needed a version of that sign and it was different than ours, we'd have to change ours to meet that new guidance. And the same thing goes with ODOT, with Oregon goes. If they decide this is the way they want signals to look, then we have to make our signals look like that. What's different is actually the base, the post. We do 4 bolts in the base. This is like, welcome to my job. And they do 6. Yeah, and they're firm, like we're at odds, this is a fight, I've been in this meeting, it's not a good time, this is a real fight. So, it's, nobody's wrong, it's just a different kind of way of looking at the problem.
Is there, are the kind of like warrant stipulations, public? You know, like, so at this intersection, like, or maybe not by intersection what they are, but like for certain things, you know, like to get this installed, I put them.
Oh, is it, yeah, it's a part of the project documentation, so in the sense that everything we do is like sort of publicly available. I would say, is it accessible? That's a different question, but it is public knowledge, yes.
I have a related question to that, so. I mean, obviously the date's changing all the time, so like how, it's gotta be a lag between when something will change, when that, if today's crash or whatever it is that triggers the.
Yeah, you're absolutely right. Like if we, so say Shattuck and PH Highway, if there weren't a signal there, and I wanted to put one in, thankfully there's already one. And there was a fatal crash today, and I was like in design already on my project, that would not be included, right, in that data. And so I might do something like lesser, I might put in a four-way stop, not realizing that the intersection just crossed the threshold for meeting like a full signal warrant. That definitely happens. And at some places like Outer Vision, that is something that we're sort of like seeing, right? Because the crash rates, Outer Division has been modified, but I'm working on a project on Stark, it's very parallel situation. And it is absolutely a thing where when we first picked up the project a year ago to now, the crashes have continued to grow, right? So a warrant I did in 2021 is not valid now, right? Yeah.
Is a lot of your job just like responding to fires, like something that's urgent stuff gets attention?
Mine is capital projects, so luckily I don't have to do just the. We have a whole team that deals with that, and I'm not on that team. And our budgets are not great, but I don't think I'll be reassigned. No, I get like the grant money. We get grant funding through, again, USDOT and Federal Highway and Multnomah County and Metro and everywhere we can scrape a dollar out of. And they pay for these type of upgrades. And so my process is a design process, of which Thuy plays a role. Like the community outreach is kind of the first part of that project, right? After we get the funding, what does the community think we need here? Okay, what does the engineering say? Okay, what does our policy say? Lisa's gonna talk about that. And that's kind of like the capital project process, right? So less fires and more what would be like a long-term simmering burn. By the time we get to a capital project, the problems have been really well established at any given intersection that we're dealing with. Yes. I'm not thankfully planner or capital projects manager, so I can't say specifically. But it would be fun to ask Lisa to answer that question, because that's her. Yes.
If a project doesn't like meet, I don't know if this is the right term, like doesn't have 5 deadly practices, but it has some other treatment that would be called for by that manual. And if you build something else that is more, I don't know, would be called for if you had 5 serious crashes.
Yeah.
What is the impact of that? Does that mean that you don't get certain money, or is there like federal people are gonna be like, no, you can't upgrade this intersection, or?
Yeah, that's a good question. No, the Federal Highway is not auditing our signal warrants. They do not do that, to the best of my knowledge. They do review our projects, and so they might, in the early phases, ODOT and Federal Highway or whoever sort of is like the person involved may say, do we need this? But it's our money, and so we can kind of spend it how we want to spend it. I think we call them guides and manuals because they're really just guidelines for us. I have a project on Stark actually, where we are not meeting that 5, it's 3. They're very serious and pedestrian involved. But our volumes are such that, they're pretty high, and there was 2 other crashes right outside of the 3-year, right? So I'm gonna make the argument we need it, just because it doesn't meet the letter of the law, it doesn't meet the spirit, right? And so that's, and that's kind of where your engineering judgment comes in, where it's just like, you have to decide if this is the right decision. I usually lean towards higher safety measures, that's my background. Some people are more cost concerned. It's engineered by engineer. Yes, I should probably move on to the next slide.
You can take some other questions now.
Yeah. This is a pedestrian crossing design. It's another mix of tools where we have striping. This is not how we typically do our striping. This is ODOT's facility, technically Powell, right? And so ODOT got to choose how we mark that road, and they chose Continental. We usually do what is commonly referred to as zebra stripe, right? It's sort of short kind of stripes throughout the intersection. And we believe it's safer, high visibility crosswalk markings versus this, but I don't know, I think that is right. So I'm not gonna side with ODOT on this one. I think that's the right answer. We should have done that here. We have a bike facility here as well, which I'll talk about on the next slide. This is another one. It's a pedestrian crossing design. So we have markings. We have. Could you flip back really quickly? This is the signal that goes to that crossing. So we have the PED signal here.
It is funny.
Is that? I thought so. I could be wrong.
And Marisa, can I use this slide just for a second?
Yeah, please.
Okay, so I just want to point out, and if you were gonna
I'll
argue
take
this,
the
I apologize. Each corner has curb ramps, but you'll notice that the yellow these are called truncated domes. This corner and that corner have 2, and this corner and that corner have just 1 diagonal. And when it's my turn, I'll explain. But I don't have an image that shows.
Yeah, no, that's a good one. Yeah, for that. I didn't think about that. And so we have sides, we have permanent pavement markings, we have, and we have a median island here, which is another great kind of tool in our toolkit of ways in which we can protect people who are crossing the street by bike, by foot, or mobility, device, from high-speed, high-volume roadway. And then I think this is not the last. Okay, my second to last one is bike facilities. You can tell them by their green, obviously. This is NATO Parkway, our newest and brightest facility. It's another one where we just have kind of all of the fun things are involved here, right? We have a lot of green. I don't think I've ever seen this much green on anything, like it's very green. We have many signs through here telling bikes to go here, so you're getting those redundancies. We have bike signals through here, and then we have a median as well for bikes to use. And then my last one is a transit island station, and I feel like Lisa's probably got some thoughts. I know she does, because I just heard when I was talking to my colleague, she was like, Lisa's got some thoughts. That's why she's here. Yeah, totally. This is one of our kind of newer things that we're doing. So we spend a lot of time talking about bikes and pets. Of course, if we really want to reduce vehicle miles traveled, if we really want to do single vehicle miles traveled, right? We need to focus on transit. That has to be a priority. And so one of the ways that we can do that from the infrastructure side, and not just being sort of the TriMet owner of the transit agency, is to build better infrastructure for transit users. And this is I'm going to say an attempt. This is an attempt at that. I don't know if we've nailed it. I know we haven't nailed down the design. Like I said, I just learned that earlier. And so we have our beautiful green, and then these these are the crosswalk markings I was talking about before. This is really interesting, I think, to look at, because we're talking about kind of mode conflicts, which you don't always think about, right? Like a crosswalk through a bike lane. But that is a real conflict because, of course, as we all have, if we've encountered this before, that can be a pretty dicey situation for us, a pedestrian, if a bike's moving at a certain speed. We
Even
have,
bicycles have to look out.
what's that?
Even bicycles have to look out.
Absolutely. We sometimes do like a shark's teeth as well, to sort of, it's another kind of symbolic, like, be aware of another mode crossing. But in this case, we just opted for that. Shark's teeth, by which I mean, I don't know why we call them animals, but it's just the little triangles, right triangles. We have, oh yes, I didn't talk about these, I'm sure anybody who's driven in the city is familiar with our plastic ones. Yeah, there's a lot. We call them bollards, is typically, our maintenance guys, our maintenance people say, plastic wands. They have a lot of different names. Candlesticks, that's a good one. And they are not a tool I would prefer to use for so many reasons, environmental impact being number one, because they are plastic, we have to replace them frequently, and they're a major contributor to waste, unfortunately. And then the second reason being they're not really doing the thing we need them to do right now. So, yes, the thing that you will notice that is missing is signs. We don't have any signs on Strader Island, which I think is kind of interesting. Okay, so those are some of the kind of Legos that we sort of build our roadways with. And I'm gonna have Lisa come up now.
Will you leave this up?
Yeah.
Okay, hopefully you'll humor me, I'll introduce myself in a second and all of that.
Yes, you wanna.
Actually, I'm gonna use this slide before it's gone, because I don't have one.
Sure.
And Marisa teed it up so well. So some of the concerns, the truncated domes and the slopes here probably qualify for accessibility under the ADA. But a transit island isn't an ADA element. ADA did never anticipate that. So we started building these for really good reasons, but without always engaging people with disabilities, people who use them in a way that's different than other people before we did it. So this is actually maybe exactly one that somebody's talked to me about. This is out on Halsey. Yep, Halsey Weiler, Copeland. Yes. So if a mobility device user, like a mobility scooter user, is out here trying to get on the bus, if you can see the blue sign, the blue bus stop sign up there, depending on how big of a scooter they have, they can't have the bus deploy the ramp and navigate around this fence that's here in a way that they can get onto the bus. So in this case, there's a fence that's in their way. We also have ones, and this doesn't look like it, but where the bike lane is a trench. So there's a curb on the back side of the transit island. So there's a curb here, but this looks flush all the way across. But there are a couple where the curb continues the whole way, the bike lane is recessed. And in that case, the ramp can deploy from the bus, but the mobility device user can't navigate around it without going off the back of the curb and into the bike lane backwards. So, and then the acknowledgement that there are no signs. In some of these cases, we have started putting signs to communicate to the bike riders, cyclists, that they're going to be crossing a pedestrian zone and that they need to slow down. I have from lots of people that means nothing to a whole bunch of bike riders, bike cyclists, or that they don't see them. But we have started doing that, and that far enough that they're not slamming on their brakes. I mean, safety for the cyclists is important too, but you'd think that the white crossing paint would maybe signal that, and it should, and it does for some people, but it's not for everybody, so. Now you can go to my presentation. Thanks. Oh, sure.
Do you all track bike collisions?
To the extent that they're reported, right?
My understanding is that these are police reports, they're not insurance reports, and not self-reported. So it'll be like a much more slim report compared to other states that have like insurance claims that are all back here.
It depends on the severity of the injury, just like most crashes. We don't actually get every crash that happens.
Is it a police report or like a medical exam report?
It's a, yeah, police report.
It's pretty common on the West Coast that that's the case. And the East Coast will be like money a little bit more. So if you file an insurance claim, then that will populate into like, you basically have to append it to a police report if there's one.
In California and Washington, the laws around work are much crazier.
Okay.
So you do get more reports now. Oregon, not so much, so we don't ever. Right.
That's okay. Hi, my name is Lisa Strader. I use she, her pronouns. I am PBOT's Americans with Disabilities Coordinator. Been a certified ADA coordinator for about 3.5 years. Before being at PBOT, I was ODOT, so the Oregon Department of Transportation's ADA program manager for 4 or 5 years. I lived up here, worked in Salem, drove to Salem every day. So nice to live and work in the same city. My presentation has this kind of fall squash yellow color theme. And on my first slide are some examples of what PBOT's responsible for in the way of accessibility. Some of them are infrastructure elements and some of them are programmatic elements. So in the upper left-hand corner, is a sidewalk that's sloped. Cross slope is not compliant. You can see some red paint on there and a heaving and a crack. So that's an example of non-compliance. The lower left-hand corner is a curb ramp. It's a corner with 2. So I think I have another slide and I'll talk about 2 versus 1. Presumably it's compliant. Upper right-hand corner, a meeting where we've got the woman that's sitting down and typing is doing closed captioning. And the woman that's standing up is doing American Sign Language. So that's the way we make, one of the ways we make meetings accessible. So that's a really important element, and not just for PBOT, but for any, well, really for anyone, but it's a requirement for state and local governments. And then the bottom right-hand corner is, this is like at 7 o'clock in the morning, there was no traffic around. I promise that my white cane user is not in grave danger as I'm letting her stand in the middle of a crosswalk so that I can take her picture. She's holding a state law stop for the blind sign. We did a photo shoot with some white cane users a couple years ago. Go ahead. So to give you some context of disability in the United States and in the state of Oregon, got an image of the United States with sort of goldenrod and blue silhouettes of people. 1 in 4, so the blue are people who identify as having a disability, adults. And Oregon really, my other graphic is an outline of the state of Oregon, gray, with an orange person representing that, about 1 in 4. It's really close. Oregon actually has a slightly higher, 28% versus 26%. This is really current data too. It's from May of 2023 from the CDC. Go ahead. So the ADA was signed into law in July of 1990, 33 years ago. It is a civil rights law. You might hear people talk about it being an unfunded mandate, which is not true. A civil rights law can't be an unfunded mandate. It prohibits discrimination against people with disabilities and protects people associated with those people too. So if people have a caregiver, they're protected under the ADA as well. The image that I have is George H.W. Bush signing this into law with a couple wheelchair users next to them and a couple of people standing behind them. ADA has 6 titles. As it relates to the transportation system, that falls under Title II. because we're a state or local government, so PBOT transportation falls under Title II. Title I is employment, 3 is like commercial businesses, 4 is telecommunications, 5 is miscellaneous, and 6 is civil rights. So transportation system elements that are specifically required under the ADA, so remember I said like that, transit island isn't identified in the ADA, maybe eventually. PROAG, the public right of way accessibility guidelines just came out, that isn't in there, but some things about crosswalks are in there that up to this point weren't. But pedestrian signals, so Marisa showed some of those. Transit stops for the streetcar, the light rail, and bus. Our responsibility for that overlaps with TriMet. Sometimes they're completely responsible, sometimes we're completely responsible, almost always we are. We are responsible for the right of way, they're responsible for the structure, for instance. Sidewalks, on-system parking, so accessible parking on the transportation system, not in the structured parking, and then programs. So Marisa showed you some pedestrian signal on a very complex intersection. This is on a simpler location. Thuy talked about the division transit project, and Marisa talked about capital projects. So a lot of the work to make our elements that are required to be accessible under the ADA that way happens during projects. I mean, it happens during they all happen during some kind of a project, but we have a requirement under the ADA to make everything compliant. We're supposed to have done it decades ago. And so, since we're not there yet, and because we're a Title II agency, we have to have a transition plan. So we'll get some of the work done when a project, like the ones that were mentioned, triggers a requirement. So when we pave through an area, we pave a whole street, we have to make all the programs that are along that route compliant. If we replace a sidewalk, and I have to say, I don't know what this project was overall. Something about this project caused us to make the pedestrian signal that in this photo is not compliant. And this is turned around, so you're looking one way here, you're looking the other way on this image. But because we were redoing the concrete here, it triggered us making sure that this pedestrian signal was compliant. So compliance for pedestrian signals is reach, how far does somebody have to reach? There's a limit to the distance. Height, it has to be no more than a certain height, and a level landing. PROAG, which I just referenced, the public right of way accessibility guidelines, also is going to talk about audible and biotactile. So that somebody who can't see that can hear it and find it to push it. Go ahead. Transit stops, this is one of those overlap areas. Here PBOT built an extension to the sidewalk and asphalt right now. I think these are temporary, and initially we'll do concrete and literally extend the sidewalk, but lots of different transit stop. Anybody who takes any transit, there's no consistency with transit stops, right? Some of them have a shelter, some of them don't. Sometimes the shelter's close to the road, sometimes it's set back. Some of them are just a hole in gravel with nothing connected to it. Again, the PROAG is gonna require that you at least have to have some kind of an accessible path to get to that location, even if everything else about it isn't accessible. Go ahead.
You're talking about replacing the asphalt with concrete. Why is one better than the other in terms of accessibility?
Concrete's just more durable long-term, so.
Asphalt is technically.
Makes it, you have to replace it.
But it's also quicker to put down, right, and less expensive to do originally, which is why we do it temporarily. Yeah. So unfortunately, you know, you pay to do it, not wrong the first time, but temporarily the first time, and then pay again to do it right the second time. Not in all cases, but in some cases. Sometimes it's better to make something accessible today, even if it's gonna have to be redone later. We generally try to avoid doing that and minimize doing that, so. Go And accessible parking spaces, so I was gonna note that the asset, image that, it says shared, probably, yeah, it definitely will have programs on there. It probably doesn't have accessible parking spaces, because this is really just considered part of the transportation system. This will just be counted in the miles of asphalt we have probably. If we count the signs, this sign will probably count, but, most of the guidelines that to this point, jurisdictions like us have followed, state and local governments have followed related to ADA are the 2010 ADA standards, which really were for building sites, and we take what they provided there and interpret that for the transportation system in our case. So the PROAG, the public right of way accessibility guidelines, are going to give us much better guidance on a lot of what we build. There was no guidance for how many accessible parking spaces you should have in the transportation system until PROAG. So we've actually been operating under PROAG for a couple of years at PBOT because there was nothing else that said how many parking spaces we should have on a block face, for instance. So we're actively adding these to get to, it's supposed to be 4% of commercial areas. And I don't know what that number will turn out to be in Portland, but we do have, I think, a really good, robust program. This is Hawthorne, where we, 30 block stretch, added 12. Well, I should say we added 10 more than we had. We had 2 to start with. So we had 2 in that stretch, and when the project was done, we had 12. So that was a great improvement. And then sidewalks. So I'm sorry, this is a really dark image, but it's got several sidewalk panels that are very discontinuous. That's a word. Big differences from one panel to the next. Somebody using a mobility device would have a really hard time. Somebody pulling a stroller, pushing, pulling a wagon or pushing a stroller, pulling luggage. Somebody using white cane would not be able to know what was going on here at all. So we, like really a lot of cities, which is not an excuse, put the responsibility for sidewalks on adjacent property owners. We have a program that says we're supposed to be enforcing that, and we're probably not doing that as much and as well as we should. So we have a lot of locations like this. We occasionally fix these, but or we have a project where we're adding a stretch of sidewalk that doesn't exist, which, by the way, is not a requirement of ADA. We don't build sidewalks where there aren't any. There's a lot of good reasons to add sidewalks where there aren't sidewalks, and accessibility is a big one, but it's not an ADA requirement. But where we have sidewalks, they're supposed to be accessible. Yeah.
Are property owners then also allowed to cut down those trees whose roots are the sidewalk?
No, I mean, that was split. Sometimes, but not always, not always and not automatically. And our urban forestry does evaluate trees like this one. And sometimes we do the best we can to both keep our tree canopy and make the sidewalk accessible. And then curb ramps. So this is an image on, it's in Beaverton. I know it's an ODOT facility because this came with me from ODOT, but this was just built. These 2 staff in safety vests and a level are out there measuring this beautiful new corner. Looks great, very usable. And then if you'll go forward again, but this isn't compliant. So another thing that a lot of people talk about is how hard it is to build compliant curb ramps. Why do they cost so much? Why does it matter that they're so compliant? Why do all these measurements matter? Because if you remember the previous image, that looked really good, right? So for a lot of people, that this corner is going to be great, but super embarrassing moment for me, talking to, should know your audience, always know your audience. I was talking to a organization that supports and serves people with disabilities, several people with disabilities in the room. And I described the previous image as curb ramps that work as intended. And a woman who uses a walker told me that this is exactly the kind of situation where she came up to it thinking it was compliant, right? Looks really good. Put her walker down, and because there's a 2.5% difference between this side and this side, when she put her walker down, she expected her walker to land flat, and it didn't. And she fell over. So sometimes I was told these can be worse than the ones that look really bad, because at least then you're prepared for it probably not to work the right way and you're cautious. These can be more problematic, and that's one of the reasons that it's so important to get them exactly right, because they look really good. So we hear a lot from community members about why we're tearing out perfectly good looking corners, and I don't disagree with why I can't get it right the first time, but it really is important to truly get it right. So the other thing that we talked about, and I pointed out in the photo, is that so currently PBOT standard is 2 curb ramps at each corner. This is a picture of diagonal curb ramps, so if you just keep going forward. So I can walk down those curbs and straight along the street and just keep going on my way. But if a wheelchair user is with me, this is their route. So, one, it's a lot longer, it's not equitable. It also puts them out in traffic. And a lot of times people who use mobility devices are much lower profile. And especially if a driver sees me walking along and doesn't even stop to think about the fact that I could have a child next to me, or I could have a mobility device user next to me, they wouldn't necessarily think about it. They think that they've seen the pedestrian. And so this is one of the reasons that we now build 2. We do have a right to build 1. There are technical circumstances where there just isn't room for 2. There could be a building that's too close to the corner. There could be drainage that's really problematic to move, or signal poles. Technically, if it's a utility pole, not a signal pole, well, we shouldn't, our signal pole shouldn't be in the way, but sometimes there are utility poles that are in the way. Technically, you can ask those to move, but a lot of times that doesn't happen. So I've talked to you about the infrastructure elements. So ADA requires us to provide equal access to everything we do. So full program access. So not just all of the transportation system elements that I pointed out and Marisa mentioned, but all of our programs. So this image on the left here is a temporary street use. It's access to outdoor dining space that's in the public right of way, and the way that you will get there is to step up onto this ramp. So they have a ramp, but there's a step at the bottom. And so if I'm a mobility device user, I can't access this space. This was early in the pandemic. We have guidelines now that are much more robust. And over time, hopefully all of those things will change, but that's an example of a program. Services are like leaf collection, so we have to be sure that we've communicated effectively to everybody about the fact that they need to move their car off the street. Activities, so meetings, so you may have noticed that I'm telling you more about my slides than maybe you feel like I need to, because I think you can all see them, but especially in a big room of people, you should never assume that everybody there experiences the presentation the same way I do. So I describe my slides if I'm ever doing a public presentation on the work that I do, or a presentation to a big group. If I'm in the office with 5 coworkers that I know can see them the same way I can, I don't do that. But also, so meetings, not just getting in the building, but if I was handing out things, can everybody know what I've given them? Maybe there's somebody, so I'm describing my size, but maybe there's somebody who isn't hearing in the room. And we do have a notice on the bottom of everything we put out that we will provide accommodations, and that's great. but it says 72 hours ahead of time. If somebody contacts us short of that time, we'll do our best to get somebody, but, not always possible, and there's no obligation. And that doesn't allow somebody who needs something different than I need to decide at the last minute to come to a public meeting. Or kids' soccer game got canceled. Gosh, it was really important. I was gonna go to that city council meeting. I couldn't because my kid's soccer game was more important, but now I could go. Oh, but I would need an sign language interpreter, and there won't be one. So accessible meetings are really important, and that feeds right into effective communication, so accessible documents. And then our website. So a little bit back up to leaf collection. We, maps are really an inaccessible part of almost all websites. Maps were just never really, even though there are new now website accessibility guidelines, maps are really problematic. They, for the most part, they have all kinds of layers that assistive technology can't interpret. So we have, at PBOT, been adding statements on all of our website landing pages that acknowledge that they're not accessible, that we're working on it. We are, as a city, we're working with our biggest platform, website platform provider. And it gives contact information for somebody, and it gives a description of what the map is about. So I first learned that we had a problem with this like 2.5 years ago when we were putting out leaf collection flyers digitally, and somebody called me and said, I can't read this map. How do I know when this is coming in my neighborhood? So, yeah, all of those things are really important to make what PBOT does and other state agencies fully accessible.
Is this a street plaza or is
You say that again, I'm sorry.
this a street plaza or is it a business?
It's on the public right of way. It's on our public right of way. I think it is in a plaza, but, and it is an old picture. I don't know that that business is, still non-compliant like that. So I mentioned a transition plan. That's how we're gonna get a lot of the work done that isn't touched by a, capital project. So we have to have a schedule for compliance. We have a 20-year schedule. We're in year 3. So 20 years is already 33 years, so. Designating an ADA coordinator, so we did that. We have to work on modifying all of our infrastructure. We have to review and update policies and procedures. So we didn't have an accessible parking policy, so now we have one of those. We have to dedicate funding. We have to actually work the plan. We can't just have a plan. And then we have to have a complaint process, and it can't come to me. There has to be a way for somebody to go someplace separate than me. And we do. We have a really good complaint process, and most people come to me, which is so great. Well, we don't count sidewalk or urban camping. Last year I got about 200 people contact me directly. It was great. I think we had 1 formal complaint last year. So far this year we have 2. So it was, we want to deal things with at the lowest level as possible, but we still have to have that process. And circling all the way back to Thuy, engaging community members with disabilities is so important early in the process. So those public meetings, I help connect organizations that support and serve people with disabilities, or people with disabilities who contacted me and said, hey, I want to be involved, please let me know. So that we're getting those voices in the room, because you can't always just assume that however we're broadcasting that, even though we say everybody's invited and it's true, that everybody's going to know that they're invited and truly feel like they are welcome to come talk to us. And complying with ADA benefits for everybody. So I've mentioned sidewalks, I mentioned strollers on sidewalks, but like curb ramps, deliveries, strollers, those automatic doors. Your hands are full. It's great to not have to manually move that door. Larger print works for a lot of people. Closed captioning, I don't know about anybody else, but sometimes I multitask. So having both hearing and seeing the words is really helpful. And then when we have a certain width for a sidewalk or in a building, you can walk next to somebody and talk to them. You don't have to feel constrained. And that's it. Thanks so much.
Take some questions. Are there any specific questions for Lisa?
No, I'm done. Go ahead.
So what went wrong when building those transit islands? What's the story? What's the story of why they were built without?
Well, I will tell you that the Committee on Accessible Transportation at TriMet says that we never talked to them. And I think they were done collaboratively with TriMet, and I think that we didn't talk to people who were gonna use them in a way that was different than I'm gonna walk up and get on the bus. So, and maybe when I said, you guys, anything else to add to that? Yeah.
That's always a good place to start. And then, so I took part in some of the initial kind of like technical meetings around the islands when I was at my consulting firm at planning. And it was bikes. The whole conversation was, how are bikes gonna get through here? And that was really the focus, because we just hadn't done that before. And I don't think one person in that room said, how will anybody but bikes get through here, right? And so, yes, nobody asked.
So that was just like not a standard procedure for ensuring that the compliant with this is not a standard.
Well, it meets, it meets from an engineering perspective. I would show you 5 things that meet ADA. But the difference between, and Lisa's whole presentation is here, between meeting ADA and making things accessible is miles.
Yeah. Right, so there's no ADA violation there, but the example I showed you is just one of somebody who has to use that and can't. We have a newer version, a newer, shinier version on 162nd and some of that Committee on Accessible Transportation, and we are gonna go out and do a tour. Again, we already built it, and now we're asking how it works.
162nd?
Yeah, 162nd, and I don't know what the cross street is.
There'll be someone who has.
Oh, great. I don't know, go ahead.
Lisa it was ADA accessible, so it means that there's no required turning radius beyond the ramp of a bus.
So there's not a required turning radius on a bus loading island. That just doesn't exist. Well, it's not an element that's called out in ADA, but as Marisa said, it doesn't mean it's accessible, and maybe we should think about turning radius. There are turning radius requirements in a bathroom.
That's what
At the top of a curb ramp, but not on a floating bus island.
Yeah.
So, but yeah, we need to think more about how to translate those other requirements to different kind of elements that we're building. Yes.
One that calls me immediately is particularly tragic because there's a very large retired house shop away that they actually looked at who lives
Right
there and would see. So that's that tragic. But my question is, how does this overlap with code? Because I'm thinking of a specific example of a business that's just south of Powell on Northeast 122nd. And they put out a sandwich board consistently, and I looked it up. It is against code.
Yep.
I filed it, but nothing goes on. The sandwich board comes out, and if you were rolling down that street,
Right.
You're blocked.
Right.
Then you're out into 122nd, which we all know is out of that road.
Right. Unfortunately, all of ADA is complaint driven for compliance. There's nobody that goes out and checks. And the city of Portland doesn't have staff we don't have the resources to go out and verify those kind of things. So if we get that complaint, we'll definitely address it. But that has to be somebody like you telling us that this is a problem, and us sending somebody out there to talk to the business, and the business can, just like you say, put it out again the next day. I honestly don't know what our fine structure is for that. I don't have one, but yeah, it's like furnishing sidewalk cafes and things, and movable furniture. So the other thing is, even if the business puts things in a certain place, other people can move them. So a better awareness by everybody that they might be moving something into the path of travel for somebody who can't see it or get around it nimbly, would be good to do.
One more question, then we're gonna break, because I just have been working after this.
On the question of complaint-driven development, is that information that I can look at, like, is this 311 data, can I look at all the complaints we made?
That's a good question. So not all complaints come through 311. I get a lot of complaints directly. And so we do make a distinction between a concern that gets kind of addressed at a lower level, and like complaint is literally a thing that we have to report. A complaint has to be reported to ODOT, Marisa mentioned how we get money through other funneled to us from other jurisdictions or other entities, and so we have a requirement to report our complaints to ODOT, so those are definitely public. I would think 311 would have to be public.
Yeah.
I think you would have to be able to request it, but I don't know that well that. I'm happy to give you a card, we can talk about it more if you want.
Seems like a pretty big area of that. Like people who are impacted can be encouraged to complain more easily, or if we find that like a small percent of the population is the one being for. I know it takes like a lot of knowledge.
Yep, exactly. Yeah, we have similarly, like I manage a program called Grants by Request. So if you are somebody who identifies as having a disability or you have a family member, you can ask me to build a program. Now, I only just build 100 a year, but you have to know that program exists. You have to know how to find it. You have to, English has to be your primary language because it's in English. You have to be comfortable telling your government you're doing something wrong, which is kind of what that is. And complain, you don't have a program here, please build me a program. All those things. So 3-1 is similar. You have to know that you can do it, and then you have to be comfortable with it.
Thank you. Let's break and come back at 8:05 and we'll video. Before we start this exercise, because we're gonna take this little class, I want to remind you, for those who did not, sign up for the field trip, please let us know, yay or nay, if you're gonna make it, so we have head count. So that's one item. Is there anything else?
Yeah, and I think we have 17 people who already completed the survey that I sent yesterday. So if you haven't completed that, just do that, and that will allow us to manage the logistics for the trip.
Yeah, so please respond. Okay, so let's get us started. We've got an exercise planned out. We're planning to keep you in the groups that you're in, we're gonna get in more detail, but we're gonna divide it into about 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 groups. There's 4 intersections, so there's 2 groups that's gonna work on the same intersection, and I'm gonna let Marisa take it away.
So earlier she was talking about, she's gonna say division. Yeah, and full disclosure, I don't work on division. I've done some backtracking on things, but it's not everything. She actually worked on it, so she's a great context person to give context questions. What I'd like you to do is, thinking about the things Lisa and I talked about, is look at some of our latest and greatest intersection upgrades. And identify, so there's questions on the back, so each group is going to get an intersection, and hopefully you have some way of looking more closely at them. And then there's some questions on the back. Like I said, my printer is terrible, so then I just put it up there, it's too bleeding everywhere.
14 point?
Yes, it's important. I knew what I was presenting. And then there's some kind of things to think about. And I think thinking about your projects as well is also kind of an interesting exercise for you to think. Which of the modes have been improved, like how have they been improved? And then which have been kind of like sacrificed for that improvement? And then thinking about accessibility, like how do ADA how do mobility device users and people with disabilities interact with these upgrades, right? Are they improvements? And since we have a robust conversation about transit, I want to try every one of these. So I'm going to just kind of drop these. And as I mentioned, this ink is like powder.
So there's, like we said, there's 4 intersections, there's 80 seconds, there's 100 and first, there's 120 seconds, and then there's 140 feet. So
image has the picture of intersection, on the back has questions. And I want us to talk it, we're gonna talk through with your table mates and really think about whether these were improvement or is there more than just what can make it better? If it's not, if these are improvements, we can never get it right the first time, right? And that's what we do in our world. We design, but then there are folks who can definitely help us. So let's spend some time going through this. Talk through your table mates, your group members, and then we'll do a few things, as a whole class at the end. So we'll give you about 15 minutes. I'll bring it back.
It's nice to meet you.
Yeah, they are.
Looks like they're partially.
Okay. Oh, somebody would like to raise their voice most of the time. I love the acoustics in this room. Okay, we have 10 minutes. I'm so glad we got to break out into groups, do the exercises. I have checked in with each of you, it looks like there's really amazing conversation we're going through, and a lot of ideas. I'm going to pinpoint each intersection up here, and there are two tables that's at 82nd. I'll ask one person from each table to talk about the ideas and the discussion they had during the breakout group. So, the first 82nd Avenue. Yes, you want to go up?
All right, the elements modified, it would be easier to list the stuff that wasn't changed, so basically everything that was from Marisa's list changed, including street signs. In terms of transit, there are shelters, there's a transit island, there's actually a titter dispenser or a hot machine that we spotted, and then separated from bikes now. For pedestrians, there are ramps, there are, I think on these two, there's curb protection now, kind of, you don't go out in traffic anymore. This is actually raised, and then the crossing distance is probably a little bit shorter because of that. For bikes, there's a green paint for visibility, you're separated from the bus path as you go through the intersection now, so you don't have a conflict at this point. And then for vehicles, the signals and signs are all improved at this intersection, easier to see. There's better clarity, there's a no right turn on red sign you can spot in one of them. And generally you have better visibility to the other modes, so all those seem like improvements to us. In terms of ADA or mobility device users, same thing, it was like shorter crossing distance, and the old ramps they were the single kind that pointed you out into traffic, that's no longer there. And yeah, curb cuts everywhere in there. And then we didn't get all the way, maybe next group can be negatively impacted. We didn't get all the way.
Okay, next group, on 82nd.
Not to make it either. Well, negatively. So how do you go about? Okay. So negatively, I think, and you guys can't see all the pictures here, but basically on this corner, I think that vehicles might complain about some things because like this curb here, while it's protected, which is a bonus for pedestrians, there are temporary cones, there are the wands that you're talking about, the curb is already black even though this is brand new construction. So something isn't working for drivers or they're just still turning like there's no tomorrow. So that was something that I saw in the photos that would be possibly a negative impact for some people. Other than that, that is the only thing that I have discussed, but I would love to hear anybody else's thoughts on that or. Yep.
If you want, I can.
Yes.
Yeah. Yes. So I think, like we talked about earlier, for pedestrians, and if you're using some kind of mobility device, getting across here could be challenging. And the same thing over there, because you've got bikes coming through here without really paying attention. And I don't know about the turning radius, but getting from here to over there. And also, I guess like as a pedestrian, like when I go to the bus stop, it's usually like, you know, if I'm running along and there comes the bus, like I don't want to have to go to a crosswalk to get there. I can just, you know, go anywhere along there. So that's the other main downside.
Great, thank you. It's amazing. Let's go to the next intersection. We're at 101st. 101.
All right, commission strategy.
All right, hello everyone. 101st. So a lot of things have already been pointed out. You're going to see here as well. So what was missing before were these protected, these new style bus platforms. the bicycle piece is at grade and is painted green now, so pedestrians can get here. This part, pretty much all the sidewalk corners are new. This part obviously is very different. It went from a single cutout originally to, I mean, I guess kind of basically two there. You have, this is very different. I don't know how it was before. We're looking at like historical imagery, but 101st is now no turn on red except bicycles each way. So, you know, cars that are here, you know, you really have this discouragement too. They're not going to try to sneak out, or they're not supposed to, of course. Let's see. There's obviously a lot of new signage. The overhead signs for the streets and signaling are all new. Up at that other bus stop, what you lost was on-street parking that was on the other side of the bike lane. That was there before, and so I guess kind of moving ahead to it. Hopefully, I haven't skipped too many pieces, but pedestrians gained a number of improvements. Especially if you look on Google Maps now, you can see all the zebra stripes that really wasn't there before. So pedestrians and bicyclists both gained those at pretty much all the intersections, I think. And yeah, let's see. So, you know, one difference too is that previously the bus would have crossed into the bike lane to stop at these stops, which also opens up the traffic lane. You have that thing where cars might try to kind of squeak by the buses. And now at this point, you know, the bus is really in the traffic lane. There's nothing to be done about it. Cars are going to have to, you know, properly go around and be careful. So yeah, as far as you know, pedestrians gained, bicyclists gained a bit. You know, they got the green markings, and we were also discussing bicycle safety there, where the bike lane was between the travel lane and the parking, which, you know, is kind of inherently dangerous anyway. Bicyclists don't like going by park stripes, like doors and things like that. So that improves. Pedestrians gained a lot of infrastructure improvements. Transit obviously improved, much easier for bus drivers to, they can quickly stop and start. They don't have to look to pull up into traffic. And so the only people who kind of like really lost a bit, you know, I don't know if cars could turn right on red here before. They lost some parking up there. You know, now buses are more properly kind of blocking the travel lane. And there's obviously some sort of you know, other calming designs happening there for cars. If I missed anything, please jump in.
No.
Great, thank you. Next up is 122nd.
Okay, so 122nd, this is a mid-construction picture, so it's kind of harder to like visualize all of the differences. But the curb was extended on all four corners. The bike lanes weren't like consistently labeled, and also there was no bike lane like where the crossings are. So that was added. They were painted green. Oh, thanks. Yeah, they were painted green, and they go actually through the intersection as opposed to just stopping right here. And there's a bike signal now as well as a bus signal. They also added zebra crossing, which in the picture beforehand was there because I was mid-construction, but it wasn't there before construction. Some no turn on red signs were added, specifically northbound on 122nd, turning right onto Division. Sorry, I'm getting a bunch of ink on my hands. The bus stop was also, it's fine. The bus stop was also extended out. The bus stop didn't have a shelter beforehand, and so a shelter was added. Bollards were added as well. I learned that the speed was lowered from 35 to 30. And they repaved the road generally, which is good. Some of the negatives and some of the like impacts for people with disabilities and accessibility needs. There are shorter crossing and sloped ramps, which is a very good thing, but some of the negatives are, there's one corner, oh yeah, it's right here, if you look, this corner, if someone in a wheelchair wanted to get to the bus stop, they would have to this pole would be in their way, they would have to go into the bike lane, go here, and then cross, like that's ideally what would happen, but they're gonna go into the bike lane, that's not safe. For anyone with a wheelchair, with a stroller, with a wagon, with anything. The bus stop size is also a little bit dubious. I don't know if I guess it depends on where the driver were to pull up, but if a ramp were to go onto the bus stop, whether or not someone in a wheelchair would actually be able to utilize that, like the turn radius that we were talking about earlier, that's also, I'm not entirely sure since I don't have the exact measurements. And also the closest crosswalk from this intersection is really, really far away. The closest protected crosswalk. So this is the only option essentially if you're crossing anywhere within like, I don't know, 1 mile radius or so of this crosswalk. That's the only option. I would say maybe the other option would be like 101 or 101st. That's pretty far away. So yeah, that's some of the negatives. And additionally, something we noticed is that they had 5 traffic signals before, and now they have around 7. And I know that redundancy is key, but it also can be really confusing for people of all modes, whether it's micromobility or you're in a vehicle or even buses. So yeah, that's one second.
Great, thank you. 148.
All right, I'll go. Everyone, Yaakov, with my 2 podmates, Bob and Sadia. So let me introduce you to one of my least favorite intersections in the city. You have a half a mile surface area parking lots this way and this way. So who would ever cross here, right? Who would ever cross? Which poor unfortunate person is going to cross the street?
I have.
So apparently, a lot of people live there. They're building a giant park, a beautiful park, right? It's got a theater, it's got all sorts of cool things. Good luck getting there, right? So you have to pull out of your parking spot here. Pretend you can exit on this road, turn and go park again, get like a soda, and like leave and go park again. This is the sort of like fabric of this area. Now, the entitlements of a lot of time, the sort of fabric here is that people in vehicles feel entitled to be able to cross multiple lanes and go into like all the different parking lots that they want to go into. So the first improvement that we've done is along here, there's a solid barrier that you can't turn left at 60 miles an hour into Fred Meyer's. Okay, but you probably can do it from this side. Now the same thing, there's a 7-Eleven and one of the other intersections, you can't like willy-nilly cross in. So that's a huge improvement. What they've also done is they've taken the corner and they've created what you've seen, those like sunlit, yeah. Well, there's the other one's a little more dramatic. Here we go. So if you are on a bike and you're trying to cross, so you get like, you're trying to cross, so it's turning red, but someone, a pedestrian here, so you can seek refuge in here, a pedestrian can seek refuge in here. So you got these little refuge spots. But the most important thing is a car can't rip into this corner at 60 miles an hour either. They have to go out, and that's a big improvement. And I've seen sunlit corners where they've sunlit for pedestrians or for cyclists. I've never seen both. It's pretty cool. And it's clear that like people who live in this area are living at odds with people who pass through. Because if you're zipping on by and go to the next town, you want to just go as fast as you can, maybe stop at Fred Meyer's and keep going. And it seems like the people who live here are like trying to access the park across the street. So that's the biggest improvement, that's the most notable. If you are taking transit, the only improvement is like now if you cross the street, it's a little bit easier, but there isn't really any dedicated transit on this intersection. So yeah, mobility for people in bikes. Cars have not lost a lane, they only have to go a little slower to turn, they can't, cut across the avenue to park. If you're disabled, you can seek refuge without going up a ramp, but I guess that's as far as we got there. So we go.
And we are 5 minutes over time. But thank you so much. This was fun, wasn't it? Yeah. Okay, so class is excused, but don't forget your projects. Midterm is next week.